The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the vast hall. Ambassador Hyunwoo walked slowly down the long path toward the center of the chamber, where thousands of alien beings waited. His footsteps made soft clicking sounds on the polished floor, but the entire chamber was so quiet that everyone could hear each step clearly. The alien delegates sat in their special chairs designed for their different body types. Some were tall and thin like the Vortani with their multiple eyes that blinked in different patterns. Others were short and round like the Kelthera with their thick gray skin and tiny mouths. The mighty Zephyrians towered over everyone else with their golden wings folded behind their backs, and their proud heads held. Hyunwoo had been the human ambassador for 15 years. He had sat through countless meetings where other species made decisions about human colonies without asking humans what they wanted. He had listened to alien leaders talk about humans like they were children who did not understand the galaxy. He had watched as human traders were arrested and enslaved by the Kelthera, while the Council did nothing to help. Today was different. Today, Hyunwoo carried a message that would change everything in the galaxy. He reached the center of the chamber and stood at the speaking platform. The great crystal above his head began to glow, which meant his words would be transmitted to every corner of the galaxy. Every space station, every colony, every ship would hear what he was about to say. Hyunwoo looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him. Most of them looked bored or annoyed. They thought this was just another human complaint about unfair treatment. They had heard it all before, and they did not care. The Vortani Supreme Chancellor Vex 9 spoke first, his voice coming from all four of his mouths at once. Human Ambassador, you have requested emergency session. Time. What crisis do you claim needs our attention? No. Hyunwoo smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they know a secret that will shock everyone else. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small data pad. The pad contained the most important document in human history. We are leaving, he said simply. The chamber erupted in confused chatter and strange alien sounds that served as laughter. The Kelthera delegate made a bubbling noise that meant she found something very funny. The Zephyrians flapped their wings slowly, which showed they were not impressed. Chancellor Vex 9 raised one of his many hands for silence. Leaving, he repeated, where exactly do you think you are going? Human colonies are scattered across this galaxy. You cannot simply pack up and leave. Hyunwoo touched his data pad and a holographic display appeared in the air above the chamber. The display showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of red dots marking human settlements. Then one by one the dots began to disappear. We are not just leaving our colonies, he said. We are leaving the galaxy entirely. Every human settlement, every human ship, every human person will be gone within 6 months. The laughter stopped. The alien delegates stared at the hologram in confusion and growing alarm. The Vortani Chancellor leaned forward in his chair, his multiple eyes all focused on Hyunwoo. Impossible, he declared. No species has ever left their home galaxy. The technology does not exist. Even we Vortani with our advanced ships cannot travel between galaxies. That is where you are wrong, Hyunwoo replied calmly. Humans have been working on something special for the past 50 years, while you were busy treating us like inferior beings. We were solving problems you never even knew existed. The hologram changed to show technical diagrams that made no sense to the alien observers. Complex mathematical equations filled the air. Designs for engines that seemed to bend space itself appeared and disappeared. Dr. So Young, our chief scientist, has perfected what we call the quantum fold drive, Hyunwoo explained. It does not just move ships faster than light, it folds space and time, allowing travel between galaxies in a matter of weeks. The Zephyrian war leader Kai 7 stood up, his golden wings spreading wide. You lie, he declared. No primitive species like humans could create such technology. Hyunwoo looked directly at the war leader. Primitive, he repeated. That is exactly the problem. You have all spent so much time calling us primitive that you never bothered to see what we were actually doing. The hologram changed again, showing images of human ships that looked nothing like the simple vessels the aliens were familiar with. These ships were sleek and beautiful, with energy fields surrounding them that made them look like they were made of liquid light. For 3 centuries humans have lived among you, Hyunwoo continued. We have been your neighbors, your trading partners. You're allies in times of war, but you have never treated us as equals. You steal our colonies and claim we are too young to govern ourselves. You enslave our people and say we should be grateful for the lesson. You ignore our ideas in council meetings, and then use our inventions without giving us credit. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some of them began to realize that maybe they had not been paying enough attention to what humans were capable of. The Kelthra delegate finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. You cannot leave us, she said. What about our trade agreements? What about the defense pact? Wu shook his head slowly. All human agreements with alien species will end when we leave, he said. We will take our technology, our knowledge, and our friendship to a new galaxy, where we can build something better. But why? Chancellor Vex 9 demanded. Why abandon everything you have built here? Because you never let us truly build anything, Hyun-woo replied. Every time humans tried to create something new, found ways to control it or take it away, you treated us like children who needed supervision. But children grow up. Eventually they move out of their parents' house and start their own lives. The hologram showed one final image that made every alien in the chamber gasp. It was a picture of the Andromeda Galaxy with dozens of bright lights, marking new human settlements. We have been preparing for this day for 50 years, Hyun-woo said. We have ships waiting at the edge of the galaxy ready to take our people to their new home. We have already sent advance teams to establish colonies in Andromeda. We have everything we need to start over. The war leader Kai 7 stood up again, his wings trembling with anger. You cannot just leave, he shouted. What about your responsibilities to the galaxy? What about the ancient creation? Wu looked at him with sad eyes. What about our rights as an intelligent species? He asked. What about our right to be treated with respect? What about our right to make our own decisions? The ambassador walked closer to the edge of the platform, so all the aliens could see him clearly. For 300 years we have tried to work with you, he said. We have sent diplomats to your councils. We have shared our discoveries. We have fought alongside you in wars. We have always hoped that someday you would see us as equal. As his voice grew stronger and more determined. But that day never came, he continued. Instead, you became more demanding, more controlling, more convinced that humans were inferior. So we decided to prove you wrong. The best way to show you what humans are capable of is to leave and build something amazing somewhere else. The chamber fell completely silent. Every alien stared at the human ambassador who had just told them that an entire species was abandoning their galaxy. In 6 months there will be no humans left in this galaxy, Hyun-woo announced. Our ships will fold space and disappear into the void between galaxies. You will never see us again unless you prove that you have learned to treat other species with respect. He turned and began walking toward the chamber doors, but stopped halfway and looked back at the stunned alien delegates. Good luck, he said simply. You are going to need it. The doors closed behind him with a final boom that echoed through the silent chamber. The alien delegates sat in shock, trying to understand what had just happened. The humans were leaving, not just moving to another star system, but abandoning the galaxy entirely. And deep in their hearts, each alien leader began to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. 3 years had passed since the last human ship disappeared into the dark space between galaxies. Captain Taman stood on the bridge of his massive warship, staring at reports that made no sense at all. The numbers on his screens showed impossible things. Trade routes that had worked perfectly for centuries were suddenly failing. Ships were getting lost in hyperspace. Communication systems were breaking down for no reason. How can this be happening? He demanded from his navigation officer. Commander, we have been using these trade routes for over 1,000 years. The young officer looked nervous. Sir, the mathematical calculations that guide our ships through hyperspace are not working anymore. It is like the universe changed the rules. Captain Taman felt a cold fear growing in his chest. The Vortani Empire controlled the largest trade network in the galaxy. Their ships carried goods between thousands of worlds. Their wealth and power came from their ability to move cargo faster and more efficiently than anyone else. But now their ships were getting lost, wandering in hyperspace for weeks before finding their way back to normal space. On the planet Kelthar, Dr. Bana worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to understand what was happening to their communication systems. The Kelthara had always been proud of their advanced technology. They could send messages across the galaxy in seconds. Their quantum communication networks connected every major world and space station, but now the networks were failing. Messages sent to nearby systems were taking days to arrive, sometimes they never arrived at all. The encryption codes that kept their communications secure were being broken by unknown forces, pirates and criminals. Were intercepting military messages and trade secrets. Dr. Baina pulled up the technical specifications for their communication system and felt her heart sink. The basic mathematical formulas that made their technology work were incredibly complex. She had always assumed that Kalthara scientists had developed these formulas over many centuries of careful research, but as she studied the equations more carefully, she began to see patterns that seemed familiar. She compared them to old records from the galactic database and made a shocking discovery: the mathematical foundation of their entire communication network had been developed by human scientists over the past 200 years. The humans had shared their knowledge freely during council meetings and scientific conferences. They had published papers explaining their discoveries and offered to help other species improve their technology. But the Kalthara had always assumed that humans were just copying advanced alien science and making small improvements. Now Dr. Baina realized the truth: humans had not been copying alien technology. They had been creating entirely new science that was far more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The aliens had been building their civilizations on foundations created by the species they considered primitive. Similar discoveries were happening all across the galaxy. The Zephyrian military found that their fleet coordination systems were based on human-designed algorithms. Without regular updates from human programmers, their mighty warships could not work together effectively. Large battle formations became confused and disorganized. The asteroid mining consortium discovered that their extraction equipment used human-developed quantum resonance technology. The machines that had been pulling precious metals from asteroids for decades suddenly stopped working efficiently. Production dropped by 80%, and the galactic economy began to collapse. But the worst discovery came from the Financial Exchange Authority. The complex trading systems that managed the galactic economy were built on human-created security protocols. Without humans to maintain and update these systems, the entire financial network became vulnerable to attack. Within months, the galactic economy crashed completely. Currency values fluctuated wildly. Trade agreements became worthless. Banks failed as their security systems were compromised by criminals who had learned to exploit the vulnerabilities that humans used to patch regularly. Species that had been allies for centuries began fighting over the remaining functional trade routes. The Vortani Empire attacked Kalthara shipping convoys, claiming they were stealing resources. The Zephyrians declared war on 3 smaller species, accusing them of economic sabotage. Chancellor Vex9 called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Council. The vast chamber was half empty because many species could no longer afford to send representatives. The remaining delegates looked tired and worried instead of proud and confident. We face a crisis unlike anything in our history, the Chancellor announced. Our entire civilization is collapsing, and we do not understand why. Dr. Baina stood up to address the council. I know why, she said quietly. We built everything on human knowledge. We used human science, human mathematics, human engineering, but we never admitted it. We told ourselves that we were superior, that humans were primitive, that we were teaching them about advanced technology. She activated a holographic display showing the technical specifications of dozens of alien technologies. Every system, every network, every piece of advanced equipment in the galaxy showed the same pattern. Human innovations formed the foundation of their entire technological civilization. The humans were not learning from us, she continued. We were learning from them. They shared their knowledge freely, and we took credit for their discoveries. They solved our problems, and we convinced ourselves that we were helping them. The chamber fell silent as the aliens realized the full extent of their dependence on human innovation. They had not just lost their neighbors, they had lost the source of their technological advancement. But the worst news was yet to come. Deep in the galactic core, ancient monitoring stations began sending out warning signals. The Devourer containment field was showing signs of instability. The quantum barriers that held the galaxy's most ancient enemy were beginning to weaken. The containment field had been built over 10,000 years ago by a coalition of species working together. It was designed to hold creatures so dangerous that the mere mention of their name was forbidden. In most cultures, the field required constant maintenance and regular upgrades to keep functioning for the past 3 centuries. Human scientists had been the ones providing those upgrades. They had worked in secret developing new technologies to strengthen the containment field and prevent the ancient enemy from escaping, but now the humans were gone and the field was failing. Emergency alerts began flashing on screens throughout the galaxy. The Devourer containment field was showing critical failure warnings. Energy readings from the Forbidden Zone were climbing to dangerous levels. The quantum barriers that had held for millennia were beginning to crack. General Wu Jin of the Galactic Defense Force stared at the reports with growing horror. The Devourers were not just another enemy species. They were creatures of pure hunger and destruction that had nearly consumed the entire galaxy once before. Only the combined effort of every species working together had managed to contain them. And now, with the galaxy divided by economic collapse and political chaos, the ancient prison was failing. The creatures that had been locked away for 10,000 years were beginning to stir, sensing that their captivity was coming to an end. The first quantum barrier collapsed with a sound that resonated through subspace. Deep space monitoring stations detected massive energy surges from the galactic core. Ships that ventured too close to the Forbidden Zone reported strange readings and unexplained equipment failures. The Devourers were waking up, and the galaxy was not prepared to face them. The species that had once worked together to build the containment field were now fighting each other over trade routes and resources. The technology that had kept the prison secure was failing without human maintenance. Chancellor Vex 9 looked at the disaster reports covering his desk and finally understood what Ambassador Haiyan had meant when he said they would need luck. The humans had not just been their neighbors, they had been their protectors, keeping ancient threats at bay while the other species focused on politics and conquest. Now, the galaxy faced its greatest crisis in 10,000 years, and the only species that knew how to handle it was gone. The first Devourer broke free from its prison with a sound that made reality itself scream. The creature emerged from the quantum barrier like a nightmare made of pure energy and hunger. It was bigger than a space station, pulsing with dark light that seemed to eat photons instead of producing them. Commander Sora of the Galactic Defense Force watched from her flagship as the monitoring station closest to the Forbidden Zone simply vanished. The massive structure had been there for thousands of years, broadcasting warnings about the ancient prison. Now it was gone, consumed by something that moved faster than her sensors could track. The Devourer fed on energy of all kinds. It absorbed the light from nearby stars, making them dim and flicker. It consumed the power cores of ships that came too close, leaving them dead and drifting in space. It even ate the quantum fields that held matter together, causing asteroids and small moons to simply dissolve into nothing. But worst of all, it grew larger with every meal. The creature that had emerged from the prison was already enormous, but as it fed on the energy around it, the thing became even bigger and more powerful. Soon it was the size of a small planet and still growing. Dr. The Rim frantically searched through the ancient archives, trying to find any information about how the Devourers had been defeated before. The old records were fragmentary and difficult to understand. Most of the species that had fought the original war were extinct. Their knowledge had been lost over the centuries. What she found in the archives terrified her. The Devourers were not just one creature, but an entire species of energy beings that existed partially outside normal space and time. They had consumed entire galaxies before arriving in this one 10,000 years ago. They had eaten hundreds of star systems before the galactic species managed to work together to stop them. The containment field had not destroyed the Devourers, it had simply put them to sleep, trapping them in a prison made of folded space and quantum energy. The field required constant maintenance because the creatures inside were always trying to escape. They pressed against the barriers, testing for weaknesses, feeding on any energy that leaked through. For 3 centuries, human scientists had been strengthening the prison, adding new layers of protection and developing better containment technologies, but they had worked in secret, never telling the other species about the true nature of the threat. The galactic government had classified the Devourer files so highly that most people believed they were just ancient legends. Now, Dr. the Room understood why the humans had been so secretive. They had been protecting the galaxy from knowledge that would cause panic. The other species would have demanded to know every detail about the Devourers and their prison, but sharing that information would have made the containment field vulnerable to sabotage or accidental damage. The second barrier collapsed 6 hours after the first. The sound was even worse this time, a harmony of destruction that made space itself ripple and bend. Another devourer emerged from the prison, this one even larger than the first. The two creatures seemed to recognize each other and began moving together toward the nearest star system. The planet Nexus 7 was home to 12 billion Vortani colonists. It was a peaceful world known for its beautiful crystal cities and advanced agricultural systems. The inhabitants had no idea that death was approaching them at faster than light speed. The Devourers arrived at Nexus 7 like a plague of darkness. The creatures surrounded the planet and began feeding on its energy. The atmosphere started glowing as the Devourers absorbed heat and light from the air itself. The oceans began to boil as thermal energy was drained from the water. The Vortani tried to evacuate their people, but their ships lost power as soon as they approached the Devourers. The creatures were not just eating physical energy, they were consuming the quantum fields that made technology work. Computers shut down, weapons stopped firing, life support systems failed within hours. The planet was dead. The Devourers had consumed everything that contained energy. The atmosphere was gone. The oceans were frozen solid. The core of the planet had stopped rotating. 12 billion people had died without the creatures even noticing they existed. The news of Nexus 7 spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been fighting over trade routes suddenly realized they faced an enemy that made their political disputes seem trivial. The Kelthera Empire recalled all their fleets from territorial conflicts. The Zephyrians suspended their war against the mining consortium, but their weapons were useless against the Devourers. Plasma cannons and missile launchers had no effect on creatures made of pure energy. Nuclear weapons just provided more fuel for the entities to consume. Even antimatter bombs were absorbed without causing any damage. General Wu Jin tried to coordinate a defense, but his forces were scattered and disorganized. The communication systems that had been failing since the humans left made it impossible to coordinate fleet movements. Military commanders could not talk to each other. Ships got lost trying to reach battle positions. The third barrier failed, the fourth barrier failed, the fifth barrier failed. Each time another devourer emerged from the prison and the combined horde became stronger and more dangerous. They moved through the galaxy like a wave of destruction, consuming everything in their path. Star systems that had existed for billions of years were erased in hours. Ancient civilizations that had survived countless wars were wiped out without a trace. The Devourers did not care about politics or culture or history. They only cared about feeding and growing and consuming. The Vortani Empire lost 3 core worlds in a single day. The Kelthera saw their industrial heartland consumed by creatures that ate their factory ships. Like snacks, the Zephyrians watched their golden cities turn to dust as the Devourers drained the energy from their building materials. Panic spread faster than the creatures themselves. Refugee fleets fled from the advancing horde, carrying billions of survivors who had nowhere safe to go. The galactic government collapsed as entire species abandoned their homeworlds and scattered across the galaxy. Chancellor Vex 9 sent out a desperate message to all surviving worlds. "We need the humans," he broadcast. "We need them to come back and help us fight these creatures. They are the only ones who know how to stop the Devourers." But the galaxy was vast and the humans were far away in another galaxy entirely. Even if they received the message, even if they cared enough to respond, it would take months for any help to arrive. The Devourers had consumed dozens of star systems and were growing stronger with each meal. Soon they would be unstoppable. Soon they would finish what they had started 10,000 years ago. The galaxy was dying and the only species that could save it was gone. The emergency meeting took place on the mobile command station Salvation, the only ship large enough to hold representatives from all the surviving species. Commander Sora looked around the crowded conference room at faces that showed fear and desperation. The proud alien leaders who had once dismissed humans as inferior now looked like frightened children. "We have lost over 200 star systems, Chancellor Vex 9. announced his four voices shaking with exhaustion. The Devourers are consuming everything in their path. Our fleets cannot stop them. Our weapons cannot hurt them. We have perhaps 6 months before they reach the core worlds. Dr. Bina stood up to address the gathering. I have been studying the ancient records, she said. The original war against the Devourers was won because all species worked together. They shared their knowledge, combined their technologies, and created weapons that could affect energy beings. But we do not have that knowledge anymore, General Wu Jin replied. Most of the species that fought the original war are extinct. Their records were lost centuries ago. We are trying to fight an enemy we do not understand with weapons that do not work. Dr. The Rim activated a holographic display showing the prison that had held the Devourers. The containment field was incredibly complex, built with technologies that none of the current species fully understood. The humans had been the ones maintaining it, adding improvements that kept the prison secure. The humans knew how to fight them, she said quietly. They have been studying the Devourers for centuries. They have been preparing for this day. They knew the prison would eventually fail. Then we must find the humans, Commander So-Ra declared. We must ask them to help us. Even if they refuse, we have to try. But how do we find them? Captain Taemin asked. They could be anywhere in the Andromeda Galaxy. We do not even know where to start looking. The search mission began immediately. Every surviving ship that could make the journey to the edge of the galaxy was recruited. Scientists, engineers, and explorers from dozens of species worked together for the first time in their history. They shared their knowledge and resources, putting aside centuries of mistrust and competition. The fleet that assembled at the Galactic Rim was unlike anything ever seen before. Vortani exploration ships worked alongside Kelthra research vessels. Zephyrian scouts flew in formation with mining consortium freighters. Species that had been enemies for generations now depended on each other for survival. Commander So-Ra stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching the mixed fleet prepare for departure. She had never imagined that she would command ships from so many different species, but the crisis had forced them to work together. The journey to the edge of the galaxy revealed traces of the human exodus. Hidden monitoring stations orbited dead stars in the void between spiral arms. The stations were inactive, but their very existence proved that humans had passed this way. Dr. Bina worked with a team of alien scientists to activate the first monitoring station. The technology was far more advanced than anything they had seen before. Human engineering had progressed enormously during their time in exile. The station came online with a soft hum and immediately began broadcasting a message. The holographic image of Dr. So-Young appeared in the center of the alien research team. She looked older than when the humans had left, but her eyes still held the same determination. If you are receiving this message, she said, then the Devourers have escaped from their prison. We knew this would happen eventually. The containment field was always a temporary solution. The creatures inside were too powerful to hold forever. The message continued with devastating clarity. We could have strengthened the prison indefinitely, but that would have required the cooperation of all galactic species. You needed to understand the threat. You needed to work together. You needed to treat the defense of the galaxy as a shared responsibility, but you were too busy fighting each other to listen to our warnings. You ignored our scientists when they tried to explain the danger. You classified our research and then forgot about it. You left the hardest job in the galaxy to the species you considered least important. Dr. Bina felt tears flowing down her face as she listened to the accusation. She knew it was true. The aliens had treated human scientists like junior partners, ignoring their expertise and dismissing their concerns. The message was not finished. We are no longer in this galaxy. Dr. So-Young continued. We have traveled to Andromeda, where we have built a new civilization. We have cities that float in spaceships, that can fold reality itself, weapons that can destroy energy beings. The image changed to show glimpses of human achievements in their new home, massive space stations that seemed to be made of crystallized light, ships that moved through dimensions the aliens could not even perceive. Cities built inside folded space that contained entire worlds. We could return to help you, the message continued, but why should we? You enslaved our people, stole our colonies, dismissed our warnings, and ignored our contributions. Now you face the consequences of your arrogance. The alien scientists looked at each other with growing despair. The humans had every right to abandon them. The galaxy had treated humanity terribly and now expected them to risk their lives to save their former oppressors. But Dr. So Young was not finished speaking. However, we are not without mercy, she said. We remember what it was like to be the underdogs, to be dismissed and ignored. We do not want to see innocent people suffer because of their leaders' mistakes. The message provided coordinates to a series of trials hidden throughout the galaxy. If you can prove that you have truly changed the message, explained, if you can show that you understand what you did wrong and that you are willing to work together as equals, then we might consider helping you, but the price will be high. Dr. So Young warned. You will have to give up your pride, your prejudices, and your belief that some species are better than others. You will have to learn to work together, not just for this crisis, but forever. The trials are waiting for you, the message concluded. Good luck. You will need it more than you know. The transmission ended, leaving the alien scientists in stunned silence. The humans were offering them a chance, but only if they could prove they had learned from their mistakes. Commander Sora looked at the coordinates displayed on her screen. 7 different locations scattered across the galaxy. Each one would test whether the galactic species could truly work together. We are going to take those trials, she announced to her mixed crew. We are going to prove that we can change, all of us together. The fleet turned toward the first trial location, carrying the hopes of a dying galaxy. The species that had once been enemies now worked side by side, united by their desperate need for redemption. The first trial was located in the ruins of New Sol, on the planet that had once been humanity's proudest colony. The city still stood empty but intact, its buildings reaching toward the sky like monuments to human achievement. The alien fleet approached carefully, unsure of what they would find. As soon as their ships entered orbit, a massive holographic display activated above the city. The image of Dr. So Young appeared, but this time she looked stern and unforgiving. Welcome to the trial of understanding, she announced. This city was built by humans who believed that different species could work together in harmony. They invited aliens to live here to share their culture and knowledge, but those aliens repaid human kindness with suspicion and contempt. The hologram gestured toward the empty streets below. For 50 years, this city was home to beings from dozens of species. Human families lived next door to Vortani merchants. Kelthara scientists worked alongside human engineers. Zephyrian artists created beauty together with human painters, but you could not accept that humans were your equals, she continued. You created laws that restricted human movement. You demanded that human businesses pay special taxes to alien governments. You insisted that human children attend separate schools because you thought they were inferior. Commander Sora felt shame burning in her chest as she listened to the accusations. She remembered the laws Dr. So Young was talking about. Her own government had supported those restrictions, claiming they were necessary to maintain order. The trial is simple, the hologram explained. You must solve the problems that face this city using only human methods. You must think like humans, feel like humans, understand what it means to be treated as second-class citizens. The alien delegates were transported down to the city, where they found themselves facing a series of challenges that seemed easy at first, but became increasingly difficult. A group of refugee families needed housing, but the available buildings were designed for different species. The Vortani delegates immediately began organizing the refugees by species, putting each group in separate buildings, but the human computers that controlled the city systems refused to accept their solution. Dr. Baina studied the problem more carefully and realized what the humans wanted. The families were mixed groups that included members from different species. Human thinking did not separate people by their biology, but by their relationships and needs. When the aliens began housing families together regardless of species, the city systems activated and provided power, water, and life support. The lesson was clear. Humans thought in terms of individuals and relationships, not racial categories. The second challenge was more complex. The city needed a new government, but the traditional alien approach of appointing leaders based on species representation was rejected by the human systems. General Wu Jin spent hours trying to understand what the humans wanted. Finally, he realized that human democracy was not about representing different biological groups, but about representing different ideas and interests. The aliens had to learn to think beyond their species' loyalties. They had to consider what individual people needed rather than what their racial groups demanded. It was a completely different way of organizing society. The third challenge was the most difficult. The city faced a crisis that could only be solved if one species made a major sacrifice for the benefit of another. The traditional alien response would be to negotiate and bargain, trying to minimize their own losses, but the human approach was different. Dr. Therim discovered that humans routinely made sacrifices for other species without expecting anything in return. They helped because it was the right thing to do, not because they would gain something from it. The trial forced the aliens to give up resources they needed in order to help species they had previously considered enemies. The Vortani had to share their advanced medical technology with the Kelthera. The Zephyrians had to provide their military protection to smaller species without asking for payment. As the aliens worked through the challenges, they began to understand something important about human nature. Humans did not just tolerate diversity. They celebrated it. They did not just accept other species, they actively sought to learn from them. The second trial took place in the asteroid belt where humans had once operated mining stations. The challenge here was even more difficult. The aliens had to work together without any species taking a leadership role. Captain Taman found himself taking orders from a Kelthera engineer who knew more about asteroid mining than he did. It was humiliating for a proud Vortani military officer, but he slowly realized that competence was more important than species status. The third trial was held in the ruins of the Human Diplomatic Academy, where alien ambassadors had once come to learn about human culture. The building was filled with recordings of human teachers explaining concepts that the aliens had never bothered to understand. Democracy was not about the majority ruling the minority, it was about protecting the rights of individuals, regardless of their group membership. Justice was not about maintaining order. It was about treating every person fairly, regardless of their status. The aliens listened to lectures they had ignored decades earlier. They studied human philosophy and human ethics. They learned about concepts like empathy and compassion that they had dismissed as weaknesses. The fourth trial tested their ability to admit they were wrong. The aliens had to watch recordings of every injustice they had committed against humans. Every opportunity they had missed to treat humans fairly. Every time they had chosen prejudice over understanding. Dr. Bina watched herself dismissing human scientific papers without reading them. She saw her own species enslaving human traders and justifying it as economic necessity. She witnessed her government stealing human colonies and claiming it was for their own good. The shame was overwhelming, but it was also liberating. For the first time, the aliens truly understood what they had done wrong. They had not just been unfair to humans, they had been denying themselves the benefits of human friendship and cooperation. The fifth trial was the most personal. Each alien had to identify something they valued more than the lives of other species. Then they had to give it up. The Vortani had to abandon their claims to conquered territories. The Kelthera had to free all their slaves. The Zephyrians had to admit that their military might did not make them superior to other species. The mining consortium had to share their wealth with the species they had exploited. The academic institutions had to acknowledge that human science was more advanced than their own. One by one, the proud alien civilizations stripped away their arrogance and admitted their mistakes. They gave up power, wealth, and status in exchange for the possibility of redemption. The sixth trial brought them all together in a recreation of the original Galactic Council chamber, but this time no species sat above the others. Every delegate had an equal voice, every opinion was respected, every idea was considered. They had to solve a complex problem that could only be addressed by combining the knowledge and skills of all species working together. The solution required Vortani engineering, Kelthera mathematics, Zephyrian artistry, and the wisdom of a dozen smaller species. For the first time in galactic history, the chamber rang with the sound of genuine cooperation. Different perspectives led to better solutions. Diversity of thought produced innovations that no single species could have achieved. As the trials concluded, Commander Sora looked around at her fellow delegates and saw something that had never existed before: true unity, not based on domination or submission, but on mutual respect and shared purpose. They had learned what the humans had been trying to teach them all along, that the strength of the galaxy came not from any single species but from all of them working together as equals. The trials were complete, but the greatest test was yet to come. The Devourers were still consuming the galaxy, and now the aliens had to prove that their new understanding was strong enough to face the ultimate challenge. The message arrived 3 days after the completion of the trials. It was not a transmission from across the galaxy, but a signal from just outside the solar system. Where the trials had taken place, the human fleet had been watching all along, waiting to see if their former neighbors could truly change. Commander Sora stood on the bridge of the Unity, staring at the impossible sight before her. The human ships that decloaked were beyond anything she had imagined. These were not the simple vessels that had left the galaxy years ago. These were ships that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, their hulls shimmering with energy that bent light around them. The lead ship was enormous, larger than any space station the aliens had ever built. Its surface was covered with patterns that hurt to look at directly, as if the ship existed partly in normal space and partly in some other reality entirely. Admiral Jinho appeared on the communication screen, looking older than when the humans had left, but his eyes held a confidence that had not been there before. Behind him, the bridge of his ship showed technology that seemed like magic to the alien observers. "We have been monitoring your progress," he said, without preamble. The trials were completed successfully, but completing them was only the beginning. The real test is whether you can maintain your new understanding while facing the greatest threat the galaxy has ever known. The human fleet moved toward the galactic core with a speed that defied physics. The alien ships struggled to keep up even with their most advanced engines. The humans had clearly developed technologies that operated on completely different principles. Dr. So Young appeared on the screens of the alien ships. She looked ancient now, but her mind was still sharp. "The Devourers are not evil," she explained. "They are not trying to destroy the galaxy out of malice. They are simply following their nature. They consume energy because that is what they are. But we learned something during our time in Andromeda," she continued. "We studied creatures similar to the Devourers and discovered that they can be reasoned with. They can be offered alternatives to destruction. The battle against the Devourers was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships wielded weapons that seemed to violate the laws of physics. Beams of crystallized time that froze the energy creatures in place, quantum nets that trapped beings made of pure force, fields that converted the Devourers' hunger into harmless light. But the most amazing thing was not the human technology. It was the cooperation between human and alien forces. For the first time in galactic history, every species worked together. As true equals, human commanders took orders from alien strategists. Alien engineers improved human weapon designs. Dr. Bina found herself working directly with Dr. So Young to develop new containment fields that would not just imprison the Devourers, but would provide them with sustainable energy sources. The creatures did not need to destroy inhabited worlds to feed. They could survive on the energy produced by specially designed quantum generators. The battle raged for weeks as the combined fleet fought to contain the Devourers while offering them alternatives to destruction. Some of the creatures were too far gone, consumed by their hunger, to listen to reason, but others began to respond to the negotiations Captain Taemin commanded. A mixed squadron of human and alien ships as they surrounded the largest Devourer. The creature was the size of a small moon, pulsing with dark energy that had consumed dozens of star systems. Instead of attacking the creature, they began broadcasting a message of peace and offering. The humans had learned to communicate with energy beings using quantum resonance that spoke directly to their consciousness. The great Devourer paused in its feeding as it received the message for the first time. In 10,000 years, one of the creatures stopped consuming and began to listen. The negotiations were difficult, conducted in mathematical concepts and energy patterns that few beings could understand, but slowly, carefully, the humans and their alien allies convinced the Devourers to accept a different way of existing. The creatures could feed on the energy produced by the quantum generators without destroying any inhabited worlds. They could exist in specially constructed spaces that provided everything they needed. The final battle was not a battle at all, but a celebration as the last Devourer accepted the peace treaty. The galaxy was saved not through violence, but through understanding, not through domination, but through cooperation. Admiral Jinho addressed the combined fleet as they watched the Devourers move into their new habitats. "We are not staying in this galaxy," he announced. Many of the alien delegates felt their hearts break as they heard these words. "We have built a good life in Andromeda," he continued. "Our cities are there, our families are there, our future is there, but we are not abandoning you. We are establishing permanent embassies here. We will maintain trade relationships, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense agreements." The humans began constructing massive space stations at key points throughout the galaxy. These would serve as embassies and trading posts, but also as schools where alien scientists could learn human technologies and human philosophers could study alien wisdom. Dr. So Young established the Galactic Cooperation Institute, where beings from all species could work together on problems that affected everyone. The institute became a symbol of the new galaxy where diversity was celebrated, and cooperation was the foundation of civilization. The Devourers themselves became unexpected allies. Their unique perspective on energy and space-time helped human and alien scientists develop new technologies. The creatures that had once threatened to destroy the galaxy became partners in exploring the mysteries of the universe. Years passed, and the galaxy transformed into something unprecedented. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The old hierarchies based on military power or economic dominance disappeared, replaced by councils where every voice mattered. Dr. Bina often visited the human embassy station, where she worked with researchers from dozens of species. They were developing new forms of space travel that would allow regular communication between the Milky Way and Andromeda galaxies. The humans had not just saved the galaxy, they had shown it a better way to exist. They had proven that cooperation was stronger than competition, that diversity was more valuable than uniformity, that understanding was more powerful than force. And sometimes when ships from different species met in the void between stars, their crews would remember the lesson that humanity had taught them. The universe was vast and full of wonders, but it was also dangerous and challenging. The only way to truly thrive was to work together as equals, sharing knowledge, wisdom, and friendship. The humans had abandoned the galaxy and the universe had trembled, but when they returned, they brought with them something more valuable than any technology or weapon. They brought the possibility of a future where all species could live together in peace and prosperity. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed.